The forest was quiet in a way that made a man feel watched, not by people, but by the land itself. Tall pines stretched over the narrow trail, their branches hanging low, as if guarding secrets they had carried since long before fences and towns appeared. The old American frontier had always been full of mysteries, but nothing prepared him for the sight that rose ahead that late summer afternoon. It was not just a cave. It was a giant mouth carved into the earth, dark and wide, the kind of place no sunlight dared slip into. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, staring at the opening as a cold feeling crawled up his back, despite the warm air around him. He had wandered these woods since boyhood, hunting, trapping, and roaming from ridge to ridge. He knew the creeks, the animal paths, the forgotten logging routes, and every hollow that could hide a man. Yet he had never seen anything like this huge abandoned cave. Vines crawled along its jagged edges. Moss grew thick across the stone, and the ground around it looked untouched for years. It didn't feel natural. It looked carved, shaped by hands long gone, but far larger and stronger than any hands he had ever known. Standing there, he felt like he had walked into something he was never meant to find. He took a slow breath, letting the forest sound settle. There were no birds singing near the cave, no squirrels jumping from tree to tree. Even the breeze that had followed him for hours stopped at the clearing, as if refusing to go any farther. The silence was heavy enough to make his ears ring. Something inside him whispered that this place had a story, and it wasn't a gentle one. Folks around the frontier always spoke of strange things hidden deep in the woods. Old legends of lost tribes, forgotten miners, and travelers who vanished without a trace. He never gave such tales much thought. Most were just stories made to entertain around a fire. But the sight of that cave, towering and empty, made every tale feel real for the first time. He stepped closer, brushing aside a fern. Ground under his boots was cool, damp, and soft with layers of untouched forest soil. No footprints, no wagon marks, not even the prints of a bear or wolf. It was as if every creature on the mountain had learned long ago to avoid this opening. He swallowed, feeling the air grow colder as he reached the mouth of the giant abandoned cave. The chill rolling out was strange. Not the kind of cold you'd expect from a shadowed cavern, but a deeper chill that felt like it came from something old, something buried far below. He paused, running his hand along the rough stone. It was smooth in some places, almost polished, like it had been shaped for a purpose. The more he looked, the more he noticed faint patterns cut into the rock. Marks that didn't look like scratches from tools or pickaxes. They looked older than that. Older than anything he had ever seen. Symbols, maybe, though he couldn't be sure. He traced one with his fingertip, and a strange feeling pulsed through his arm, quick and sharp, like a cold needle brushing his skin. He pulled his hand back. The cave felt wrong. Yet something pushed him forward, the same instinct that kept frontier men alive. If something dangerous lay inside, he needed to know. The cave was too large and too carefully hidden for it to be natural. And with each passing moment, he felt more certain that someone, or something, had built it for a reason he could not yet understand. He looked back over his shoulder at the forest as if expecting to see someone watching from between the trees. But the woods remained still, frozen in a quiet that made him uneasy. He whispered a short prayer, the kind passed down from old families who survived storms. Wild animals and every hardship of frontier life could throw at them. Then he faced the darkness again. His heart thumped with a steady beat as he stepped one foot into the cave. Cool air wrapped around his legs like water. The ground sloped gently downward. The smell shifted, turning from fresh forest earth to something older, like stones soaked in forgotten stories. A faint echo drifted from far inside, too soft to understand. He listened, holding his breath. It came again. Not wind, not water, something else. He stepped deeper. Light faded fast behind him, swallowed as if the cave had been hungry for years and now tasted its first visitor. He slowed his breathing to keep quiet, letting his eyes adjust to the dim glow that managed to follow him. At the edge of his vision, the stone walls rose like towering ribs of an ancient beast. If the cave had once been carved, whatever shaped it had done so with power far beyond anything he knew. He knelt and touched the dirt floor, brushing aside the thin layer of dust. A strange track curved through it, as if something had been dragged or crawled there long ago. He followed it a few steps before it disappeared into the darkness. His heartbeat quickened. The track was not from any animal he recognized. It was too long, too smooth, and too deliberate. He reached for the small lantern tied to his pack, but after a moment he stopped. Something in him warned that light might change whatever waited inside. Instead, he kept walking slowly, letting the faint glow from the entrance fade behind him. The deeper he went, the more he felt the weight of the cave pressing in. But he also felt something else, a pull like a whisper drawing him toward the heart of the darkness. He stopped when he heard a sound that made his blood turn cold. Not loud, but sharp enough to freeze him in place. A crack, then a shift, as if something moved ahead. The sound echoed once, then faded into the cavern's deep hollow. He swallowed, feeling his throat tighten, and listened again. The cave remained quiet, too quiet. He took another step, slow and careful, trying to steady the tremble in his hands. A strange glow flickered far inside, faint and pale, almost hidden by the shadows. It didn't look like firelight or sunlight. It had an eerie color that didn't belong in a cave or anywhere in the natural world. His breath caught. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a mistake by stepping inside this giant abandoned cave. Every instinct screamed for him to back out, to turn around and climb the ridge until the forest swallowed him again. But the glow pulsed once more, faint but undeniable, like a heartbeat deep within the earth. Something was in there. Something that hadn't seen the light of day for a long time. He forced himself to move closer. Each step echoed like someone else was following him, though he knew he was alone. The chill grew stronger, crawling across his skin and sinking into his bones. His hands shook, but he kept going. Whatever waited inside this cave, he had walked too far to turn back now. When he reached the point where the faint glow flickered brightest, he stopped so suddenly his boots scraped the stone. His breath hitched. His eyes widened. What he saw ahead was not possible. Not natural. Not anything he had ever dreamed of finding. His blood froze. His legs turned heavy. And in that moment, he felt something stir in the darkness. Something awake. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out as the glow shifted again, revealing a shape he could not yet understand. And then the sound came again. The crack, louder this time. Something was moving toward him. The sound echoed through the cavern like something ancient had just woken from a long sleep. He held his breath, feeling the cold air settle heavy on his chest. The faint glow ahead trembled again, casting thin streaks of pale light across the stone. He took a small step back, the instinct to run rising sharp inside him, but his boots felt rooted to the ground. Every hair on his arm stood straight as the silence returned. Thicker than before, as if the cave itself was waiting for his next move, he forced his breathing to steady. The darkness in front of him was too dense to understand. He needed more clarity, more sense of what he had stepped into. And though fear pressed in around him, another part of him pushed forward. The old frontier instinct that made a man search deeper when others turned back. He knew that whatever lay hidden in this giant abandoned cave held some story, one older than the towns, older than any settler trail, older even than the tribes who walked these lands long before him. He crouched lower, listening hard. The air carried a faint smell that reminded him of damp earth mixed with something metallic, something old. It wasn't blood, but it held the same sharpness. He tried to ignore the shiver that ran down his spine. He shifted his weight carefully, his hand brushing the cave wall to steady himself. The stone felt colder now, almost like touching ice. That was strange. They were not deep enough underground for such a temperature. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to think through the fear clouding his thoughts. He needed to remember why he came this far into the woods today. That morning, before the sun had fully risen, he had been tracking a strange animal sign near the creek. Hoofprints he didn't recognize, wide and deep, as if some heavy creature had passed through during the night. The prints didn't belong to any horse, elk, or bison he had ever seen. They moved along the creek bank, crossed the ridge, and disappeared straight into the thickest part of the woods. Something about them had pulled him in. Something felt wrong. He had followed the tracks for hours, pushing through thick brush, climbing over fallen logs, crossing slippery rocks near the stream. The deeper he went, the more the forest changed. Birds that usually filled the morning with noise were gone. The air felt still and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Then he found the clearing, hidden beneath overgrown vines and old pines. At the center of that clearing stood the cave. As if whatever left those strange tracks had come from the darkness inside, he opened his eyes again, staring into the place where the glow had appeared. The memory of the tracks tightened the knot in his stomach. Something had walked into the woods last night. Something heavy, something unknown. And now he stood inside the place it may have come from. He swallowed hard, listening again for any sign of movement. Nothing came. Just the slow drip of water somewhere deep inside. He stepped forward again, just enough to get closer to the faint glow. As he moved, his boot brushed against something small and hard. He bent down, picking it up. It was a piece of carved stone, smooth and cold. There were markings scratched across it, markings that looked just like the strange symbols on the cave walls. He held it close, turning it in his fingers. The patterns felt deliberate, like they were meant to tell a story or serve as a warning. But the shapes didn't match any language he knew. Old tribal carvings sometimes carried symbols of animals, spirits, or battle stories. But this was different. Sharper, older, as if made by hands that didn't belong to any tribe or settler. He placed the carved piece carefully into his pocket. Something told him he might need it. The glow flickered again, stronger this time. He took a slow breath and stepped deeper. Each footfall echoed lightly, bouncing off the high cavern walls. As he walked, the ceiling rose higher, and the cavern widened into a broad chamber. The faint glow came from the far end, where the ground dipped downward into another passage. He paused, listening again. A soft hum drifted through the air. He couldn't tell if it was natural or not. It sounded too steady, too smooth, almost like something pulsing from deep underground. He placed his palm flat against the stone wall beside him. It vibrated faintly, like a distant heartbeat. His breath hitched again. Whatever made that sound was alive. He stepped back from the wall and looked around the chamber. There were more symbols etched everywhere. On the walls, on the floor, even on the ceiling. Some faint, some carved deep, as though someone had spent years shaping them. And beneath the symbols were grooves cut into the stone. Lines that seemed to form pathways leading toward the lower passage. He knelt and pressed his fingers into one of the grooves. The stone felt warmer there, as if something old had flowed through it long ago. The warmth unsettled him. There was no natural reason for it. He pushed to his feet, wiping his hand on his trousers. The hum grew slightly louder, the glow growing steadier. His chest tightened. Something deep inside him whispered that he should go back, that he had walked far enough and seen more than any man should, but another part of him shoved that fear aside. He needed answers. He needed to understand what lived below this place and why the forest was acting strange. And if something dangerous had returned to these woods, he needed to know it before it reached the towns or the ranches spread across the valley. He kept moving toward the glow. The ground sloped sharply downward, and the air grew colder with every step. He reached the edge of a narrow passage that twisted deeper into the earth. The faint light seeped from the bottom, the hum rolling upward like a warning. He crouched low and studied the passage. It was too smooth to be natural. The walls curved inward, forming a tunnel that looked carved with perfect precision. Tribes never carved tunnels like this. Settlers didn't have tools for it either. And no animal could shape stone in this manner. The thought chilled him. He hesitated at the entrance, trying to quiet the pounding of his heart. A sudden gust of cold air brushed past him, carrying with it a faint sound. A distant whisper. Too soft to understand? He turned his head sharply, eyes wide. He strained to hear it again. But the cave fell silent once more. He stepped into the narrow passage. His shoulders brushed the walls as he inched forward. The light grew brighter with every step, until he reached the end of the tunnel. The passage opened into a second chamber, smaller than the first, but brighter. At the center lay a wide stone platform rising from the ground, and above it hung a strange pale glow. He froze at the sight. The glow was not fire. It was not lantern light or sunlight. It hovered in the air like a thin mist, swirling slowly. Within the swirling light, he thought he saw shapes twisting, as if something was trapped inside. He stepped closer, slow and careful. The hum vibrated through the chamber, deep and steady. The glow pulsed. His blood ran cold. He reached out a shaking hand, but stopped just inches away from the light. The air around it was warm, carrying a strange scent like heated metal. He stared harder into the swirl, and for a brief moment the shapes inside shifted into something clearer, something that looked like a face. He jerked back, stumbling. His breath caught in his throat. He blinked, but the shape faded back into the swirling haze. He rubbed his eyes, unsure if his mind was playing tricks or if he had just seen something trapped in that glowing mist, before he could step forward again. Not from the chamber, but from the passage he had come through. He spun around, heart hammering. The echo rolled through the stone. Bouncing around the chamber like a warning, something was inside. The cave with him. Something bigger than him. Something that had just moved. The crack thundered. Through the chamber again, sharper than before, and he felt the stone beneath him tremble as if something heavy had shifted in the tunnel. He forced himself not to panic, but his pulse beat fast enough to ache behind his eyes. He backed away from the glowing mist at the center of the room and pressed himself against the wall, listening hard. The faint hum from the glow continued, steady and unbothered, but beyond that, sound came another. A low scrape. Something dragging, something breathing. He held his breath, trying to pinpoint the direction. The tunnel behind him was narrow, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Whatever was coming sounded bigger, much bigger. The scrape grew louder, followed by a slow thud, like a heavy limb hitting stone. He clenched his jaw, fingers brushing the handle of the small knife at his belt. Though he knew it would do little good against anything that moved with that kind of weight, the air shifted, carrying a cold draft that wrapped around his legs and crept up his back. He stepped sideways along the wall, eyes fixed on the mouth of the tunnel. His mind raced. He had followed a trail of strange tracks into these woods, and they had led straight to this giant abandoned cave. Now the pieces were falling together in a way that churned his stomach. Whatever he had tracked last night had not wandered through the forest by accident. It had come from here, from deep below, and now it was coming back. His breath fogged slightly in the chilled air. He didn't remember it being that cold earlier. He wiped the fog from his face with a trembling hand and steadied himself, forcing his thoughts into order. He needed to stay alert. Fear could make a man careless, and carelessness inside a place like this meant never leaving alive. Another scrape echoed. Closer, he braced himself, ready to run deeper into the chamber if needed. The glow pulsed behind him like a living heartbeat, casting faint ripples of pale light across the stone floor. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The swirling mist seemed to shift faster now, as if reacting to the approaching noise. The shapes inside twisted, stretching toward him, toward the tunnel. He swallowed. The thing at the center of this room wasn't just some strange light. It was aware. He turned back toward the tunnel. His thoughts darted to the strange carved stone he had slipped into his pocket earlier. Something deep inside told him that piece of stone wasn't just part of the cave. It belonged to whatever was moving through the tunnel. The symbols carved across its surface weren't random. They were connected to everything hidden in here. He ran his thumb along the edges, hoping for a clue. But the stone remained cold and unreadable. He breathed in slowly and forced himself to think of the land outside, the valley he lived in. The ranchers who depended on these mountains for hunting and water, the families who had settled in the foothills, raising children who played beneath open skies. If something dangerous had crawled out of this cavern, if it had walked the creek banks and returned here, then those folks were at risk. He could not leave without knowing the truth, even if that truth terrified him. The scraping sound stopped. Silence stretched through the chamber. He leaned forward, trying to hear even the slightest breath. Nothing. The stillness felt unnatural, heavy. He waited, counting the slow beats of his heart, Then a faint tap broke the quiet. One tap, then another. Slow, steady, like claws, gently testing the stone. His skin prickled. Whatever was inside the tunnel knew he was here. He stepped farther along the wall, careful not to make noise. From this angle, he could see the far corner of the chamber, where a large rock formation jutted upward. If he could reach it, he might have cover. He took another slow step, keeping his eyes fixed on the dark tunnel. A faint shadow moved inside the narrow passage. He stiffened. It wasn't the movement of a man. It was lower, heavier, like something crawling on its limbs. His knife felt useless, but he tightened his grip anyway. His chest burned from holding his breath, but he didn't dare breathe too loudly. The shadow paused. Then it slowly slid backward into the passage, as if retreating. But the silence did not ease. Instead, the air in the chamber changed again. The hum from the glowing mist grew louder, rising into a steady vibration that buzzed against his bones. He turned slowly and stared at the swirling light. The shapes inside were clearer now, stretching longer and sharper. They twisted in slow circles, almost like symbols trying to form words he could not understand. He stepped closer, drawn by a pull he couldn't explain. The glow seemed to call him, not with sound, but with an old presence that reached deeper than fear. He raised his hand, stopping just short of touching the mist. Warm air pulsed from it, brushing his skin. He thought of the symbols on the stone, the grooves carved into the floor, the strange tracks in the forest. All of it pointed to something ancient, something buried beneath these woods long before people settled the land. A shiver ran through him. He wondered if the tribes ever knew of this place. They spoke of spirits beneath the mountains, forces forgotten by time. Was this cave one of those hidden places? Or was it something older than the stories themselves? His thoughts were cut short when a sudden sound ripped through the silence. Not from the tunnel. From the chamber walls, a crack spread along the stone near the ceiling, dust drifting down in a thin curtain. He jumped back, staring as the crack widened. A second crack spread across the opposite wall, then another near the floor. Something was shifting inside the stone itself. The ground trembled under his feet. The hum from the swirling mist rose to a sharper tone. He stumbled backward, landing on one knee. The glowing mist swelled, expanding outward as if inhaling. His heartbeat hammered. The cave was waking up. He scrambled to his feet and backed toward the tunnel. But as he reached the mouth of it, a sound drifted through from deeper inside. A low growl. Not like a wolf. Not like anything he had ever heard. It vibrated in his chest, heavy and deep, as if coming from something with lungs the size of barrels. He froze.
Ow.
Staring into the darkness, the growl came again, closer this time. He stepped backward, but his foot hit a loose rock. It tumbled across the floor, echoing far too loudly. The growl sharpened, followed by a sharp inhale, and then a shift of weight against stone. The thing was coming toward him again. His breath caught in his throat. He spun around, searching for another way out, but the chamber had only two openings. The tunnel behind him, now hiding the creature, and the narrow passage leading back to the first chamber. He sprinted toward the narrow passage. His boots slipped on the smooth stone as he dove inside. The walls pressed against his shoulders as he squeezed through, the hum from the second chamber fading behind him. But the growl echoing closer. He reached the end of the narrow tunnel and stumbled into the wide first chamber again. His breathing was harsh, echoing off the stone walls. The strange grooves on the ground glowed faintly now, as if reacting to the disturbance. He staggered back toward the large chamber entrance, unsure what to do next. Behind him, the narrow passage went silent. He held his breath, waiting. Then a faint scraping began, slow at first, then louder. He backed away, eyes locked on the passage. The creature was still coming. The air grew colder. The symbols on the walls seemed to deepen in color. The hum from the other chamber pulsed through the stone like a warning he could no longer ignore. He pressed his back against the cavern wall, staring into the darkness of the narrow passage. He knew he was running out of room to retreat. Whatever lived inside this cave was about to reveal itself, and he had nowhere left to hide. The scraping in the narrow passage grew louder, and each sound carried the weight of something moving with slow, heavy certainty. He pushed his back against the stone wall, trying to make himself as small as possible, though he knew it wouldn't matter much if the creature stepped into the chamber. He gripped his knife tight, even if it felt like holding a twig against a storm. His breath came fast and shallow. The air felt too cold now, almost freezing with every inhale. The symbols carved into the walls across the chamber seemed to deepen and darken, as if reacting to the creature's presence. The grooves on the stone floor faintly pulsed with a weak glow, spreading like soft veins of pale fire. He tried to listen through his fear. The creature wasn't charging. It wasn't rushing toward him with wild rage. Instead, it seemed to move with purpose, steady and cautious. The scraping paused for a long moment, and in that silence, he heard a slow, deep exhale that seemed to roll through the cavern like thunder from under the earth. Whatever lived in this giant abandoned cave was enormous. Another exhale drifted out. This time it carried the faint smell of damp stone, mixed with something older, something he could not name. His eyes stayed locked on the narrow passage as he tried to make out any movement, any glimmer of light reflecting off hide or scales or whatever it had. But the darkness remained thick, refusing to show him the truth. He took one shaky step sideways along the cavern wall. He needed to find a better position, somewhere he could run if the creature lunged. His boots scraped softly, and he winced at the sound. For a moment, the creature went silent. He didn't dare blink. Not yet. Then came a low rumble. Not a growl. Not a roar. Something deeper. Something that made his bones feel hollow for a moment. It was almost like a warning. Or a recognition. He swallowed hard. His instincts fought each other. One part screamed that he needed to flee back through the large chamber and find another path, any place that wasn't here. But another part, the same instinct that pushed him into the cave in the first place, told him he needed answers. The strange glow, the carved symbols, the ancient hum in the chamber, the tracks in the forest, and now this creature. It was all connected. Something told him he was standing in the middle of a story far older than himself. The scraping started again, this time followed by a soft rhythmic thump. A limb, a heavy one, then another thump. The sound approached slowly, echoing through the narrow passage. He took another step sideways, his eyes fixed on the entrance. His breath turned cold as a shadow began to stretch from the darkness. A shape finally broke through the thick black, and though the chamber was dim, he could tell the creature was enormous. Its outline alone filled almost the entire narrow passage. Whatever it was, it must have crawled through places that didn't want it to pass. The stone around the entrance looked scraped and scarred, as if it had squeezed through that passage many times before. He tightened his grip on the knife handle. His pulse hammered so hard, he wondered if the creature could hear his heartbeat. His throat felt tight and his legs trembled without his permission. The shadow grew larger, and for a second he saw something move just beyond the entrance. A glimmer, a sheen like wet stone or dark hide. The creature let out another slow exhale, and the air around him trembled with it. He stepped backward again, wanting space, wanting time. The grooves in the floor pulsed brighter for a moment, lighting the chamber with a faint, eerie glow. He glanced down, startled. The lines carved into the stone were no longer dull. They flickered like embers hidden beneath ash. The light pulsed in rhythm with the hum coming from the glowing mist in the deeper chamber. He looked back toward the narrow passage. The creature paused at the edge of the entrance. For one long moment, the scraping stopped completely. Silence stretched, heavy and cold. He held his breath. Then something unexpected happened. A soft tremor shook the ground. But this one did not come from the creature. It came from deeper inside the cavern behind him, where the glowing mist swirled. The hum rose sharply, turning into a pulsing vibration that shook dust from the ceiling. A deep warmth rolled through the first chamber. Cutting through the icy air, the creature reacted instantly. It jerked backward, scraping its massive form against the stone as if startled or driven by some instinctive fear. The thumps turned frantic for a moment, and he heard the creature retreat into the darkness of the passage, its heavy limbs dragging across the ground. He listened to the sounds fade deeper and deeper until the passage fell silent again. He exhaled in a long, shaky breath and lowered the knife, though his hand still trembled. Whatever had frightened that creature must have been powerful, or ancient, or both. He turned toward the deeper chamber. The glowing mist swirled wildly now, like a storm trapped in the air. The shapes inside moved faster, twisting in jagged patterns. The hum vibrated through the cavern floor until he felt it in his teeth. He walked closer slowly, pulled by a force he could not understand. When he reached the entrance of the narrow tunnel leading into the glowing chamber, paused. A soft warmth rolled over him, so unlike the cold breath of the creature. It was almost comforting, almost like a guiding hand pushing him forward. He stepped inside. The chamber looked different now. The swirling glow had grown brighter, puffing out faint waves of pale light that brushed across the walls like moving shadows. The stone platform beneath it pulsed gently, as if beating like a heart. The carvings on the ground glowed brighter too, forming a ring around the platform. The warmth seeped into his skin, chasing off the chill the creature had brought. He approached the platform with slow steps, studying the mist. The shapes inside seemed clearer now. Not a face this time. Something like a figure. Tall, thin, shifting in and out of full shape. It wasn't human, but it wasn't a beast either. It was something else entirely. He stopped a few feet away. The glow brightened as if noticing him. His chest tightened. He raised the carved stone piece he had picked up earlier. The glow flickered once. Then again, he stepped closer and held the carved stone between himself and the swirling light. The shapes inside twisted sharply, as if reacting to the piece. The hum steadied, shifting into a smooth, low tone that hummed through the chamber. He remembered the grooves carved into the stone floor in the first chamber. The warmth in the lines, the strange symbols all around him. He realized this entire place had been built for something. This chamber was not an accident of nature. It was a purpose-built place, a vault, or a sanctuary. Or perhaps something meant to hold whatever floated inside that mist. Another tremor shook the floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling, and the hum deepened. The glow swelled to the size of a doorway. He took another cautious step forward, feeling the strange pull grow stronger. The warmth grew too, spreading up his arms and into his chest. Then he heard the sound that froze him. From somewhere deep within the cavern system came a roar. A real roar this time. Violent, furious. The creature he had heard earlier was no longer hiding. It was coming back, and this time it sounded enraged. He spun around and sprinted back toward the first chamber. His boots pounded against the stone floor, echoing through both chambers. The hum grew louder as he ran, but the roar from the creature grew even louder still. Shaking the ground beneath him, he reached the first chamber just as the narrow passage trembled again. Small stones fell from the ceiling. A gust of icy air exploded out from the tunnel like a warning blast. The creature's shadow stretched across the stone floor, far larger than he remembered. He felt the pressure of its presence fill the entire chamber. He backed away slowly, heart hammering. The grooves on the floor pulsed bright one more time. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, wakening like dormant stars. The creature's growl rolled out of the passage. Deep, hungry, powerful, he knew the moment had come. Whatever fate waited for him inside this cave was rushing toward him fast. And the ending of this story, whether hopeful or tragic now, depended on the next few breaths he tightened his grip on the carved stone and stepped into the center of the chamber as the creature finally began to emerge from the darkness. The creature stepped into the first chamber, its massive shadow stretching across the stone floor like a storm cloud swallowing the last bit of peace. He stood in the center, gripping the carved stone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The creature's form finally emerged from the narrow passage, and he felt his breath catch. Its body was broad and powerful, covered in a hide that shimmered faintly like wet rock. Its limbs were thick, scarred from years of scraping through stone corridors. But its eyes were what froze him the most. They glowed with a pale, aware light, not wild or empty. Those eyes studied him with a strange mix of caution and pain, as if the creature itself had been trapped in this giant abandoned cave for far too long. For a moment, the creature stood still, only breathing in slow, heavy waves. The air turned icy with each exhale, carrying that strange metallic scent. He took a small step back, raising the carved stone. The creature's gaze moved to the stone instantly, and its giant head dipped slightly, almost like recognition. It let out a deep rumble that didn't sound like anger now. It sounded tired, worn, as though it had been waiting for something or someone for many years. He swallowed hard. His fear slowly shifted into a quieter understanding. The cave wasn't a place of danger by nature. It was a place of protection. A sanctuary built by an ancient people to guard something powerful. The glowing mist in the second chamber, the pulsing grooves, the humming stone walls, and this creature were all part of the same old story. A story hidden beneath the American frontier long before anyone settled in the valley. He wondered how long this guardian had lived here, how many years or centuries it had spent wandering these stone halls alone. He held the stone out with both hands, steadying himself. The creature lowered its head further, the glow of its eyes dimming into a softer shade. The tension in the air loosened a little. He took a step forward and placed the carved piece on the nearest glowing groove. The moment it touched the stone, the chamber lit up in a soft wave of pale light that traveled along the grooves and climbed. The walls like rising sunbeams. The creature backed away slightly, not in fear, but in a quiet, reverent way. The hum from the deeper chamber strengthened, rolling across the stone like a warm wind. He turned toward the glow, realizing the carved stone had unlocked something buried beneath the cavern. The swirling mist began to shift again, but this time it calmed, instead of pulsing wildly. The shapes inside grew softer, the movement smoother. Like a long-trapped spirit settling after years of unrest, he looked back at the creature. It watched him without aggression, without hunger, without malice. Its glowing eyes held something close to relief. Maybe it had been protecting the mist for generations. Maybe it had been waiting for someone capable of restoring the calm that once filled this sacred place. The creature let out a low breath and slowly lowered itself to the ground. Resting its massive body like a worn guardian, finally given permission to sleep, he approached the creature slowly. Still unsure of its nature but feeling no fear now. He placed a steady hand on the stone floor, just a few feet from its large head. The creature's breath brushed across his arm, cold but gentle. For a moment, the two of them existed in a quiet understanding. Both part of something bigger than the frontier, bigger than the mystery of the woods. He had come looking for answers. And instead he had been given a truth far older and more peaceful than he expected. The hum dimmed, and the light from the deeper chamber softened into a warm glow. Whatever was inside the mist seemed to settle into a deep stillness, no longer pulsing with distress. The carvings on the walls faded back into silence, and the grooves on the floor flickered once before calming into a dim, steady shine. He finally stood and walked toward the narrow passage leading back to the outside world. The creature watched him, but made no move to follow. He understood that this guardian belonged here. It wasn't a threat to the land or the people. It had simply been bound to its purpose, protecting something ancient that no longer needed guarding. He nodded once to the creature, and something in its eyes seemed to acknowledge the gesture. He made his way through the tunnels, the cave feeling warmer now, almost guiding him toward the entrance. When he stepped back into the large first chamber, the cold was gone. The air felt light, almost peaceful. The forest sounds, once frozen in silence, faintly drifted in through the mouth of the cave. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. Life outside the cavern had begun to stir again. He walked across the clearing and paused at the entrance, turning back one last time. The cave mouth, once dark and foreboding, looked like a sleeping giant now, guarding its secrets without menace. He felt the weight on his chest finally lift. Whatever had been disturbed beneath the earth had been set right again. As he moved back along the forest trail, sunlight filtered through the pines and warmed his shoulders. The anxiety he carried had eased into a thoughtful calm. He thought of the families in the valley, the ranchers who relied on these woods, the children who played along the creek beds. All of them were safe. The creature inside the cave had no reason to leave its sanctuary now. The balance of the land had been restored. He reached the ridge overlooking the valley and paused, taking in the rolling fields, scattered cabins, and winding river below. The world felt steadier. He felt steadier. He had walked into a mystery older than anything he had ever known. But instead of danger, he had found purpose and understanding. The giant abandoned cave wasn't a threat. It was a reminder that not all secrets of the land were meant to be feared. Some were meant to be respected, guarded, even cherished. As he began his descent toward the valley, he thought of how he would share what he'd learned. He wouldn't speak of the creature or the glowing mist. Those were truths meant to remain in the quiet belly of the mountain. But he would speak of the importance of the land, of respecting every shadow and clearing every ridge and cave. The frontier had its own heartbeat, its own stories written in stone and earth. And now he understood them better than ever. By the time he reached the foot of the ridge, the sun was high, lighting the valley with warm golden light. He breathed deep, letting the fresh air fill his lungs. The danger was gone. The land was calm, and his heart was steady. He walked home with a quiet sense of peace, knowing he had faced something unknown and brought balance back to the place he loved. He had stepped into darkness and returned with a deeper understanding of the frontier and its ancient secrets. And though he would never forget what he found in that cave, he also knew he had done what was right. The land was safe. The mystery was settled. And he walked forward with a renewed strength, grateful for the gift of understanding and the calm that followed. It was a good ending, a hopeful ending, one that the old American frontier, with all its beauty and secrets, seemed to approve of as the breeze rustled gently through the tall pines above him.